Okay, welcome back. There's been a bit of a lull between videos. Apologies. I'm going to try and create some more as a sort of cram before your exam. People have been asking what I think is going to come up on the exam, and Agamemnon is one character who has not yet come up at all and is a named character. So if I was to put money on a 20 marker, I would perhaps put money on for the Iliad coming up as Agamemnon. These are how he's sort of referenced within the syllabus. He's not necessarily named, but he does demonstrate all the concepts and behaviors of a hero. So also, obviously revising him would help if you had a heroism essay. Life in Troy in the Greek war camp, and the characterization of major and minor characters. So Agamemnon is certainly, I would say, a major character within the Greek camp. So what I'm going to do is go through him chronologically throughout the book so that you know which books he comes up in and how you're going to form your argument after that. Before we get on to that, we want to think about how he's characterized and some scholarship. Obviously, if he comes up as 20 marker, you don't need scholarship, but understanding scholarship will help you form your own arguments for essays anyway. So this is one of my favourite scholarship quotes, this idea that Michael Silk puts forward, that character is conceived as static, that characters don't change at all. This is a really easy quote to just have in your back pocket to be able to use it for any character essay. So this idea that character doesn't change, I would disagree with this, that characters do show capacity for development. Whether you think Agamemnon does that is a different matter. Obviously, Edith Hall, she's always a good one to drop in. If in doubt, Edith Hall said it. But Agamemnon demonstrates this idea of Greeks being Greeks versus Greeks, not Greeks versus Trojans, because the fights that he picks are most commonly with his own people. And then we get Evie Ryu, who says that characters reveal themselves through speech and action. So I'm going to think about how he uses speech and action in order to demonstrate the sort of character that Agamemnon is. So starting off in book one, I'm going to go through the basic things and then we're going to go into detail about what we could say and how we could form an argument and some analysis. So obviously in book one, he refuses to give back Chryseis. This causes a plague to descend on his people. He then demands Briseis from Achilles in exchange for him giving up Chryseis to stop the plague. He refuses to listen to Nestor when him and Achilles, argue. And he sends envoys to collect Briseis. He doesn't go himself, which is, I think, an interesting point. To get into more detail, he specifically, when Chryses, so remember Chryses is the priest of Apollo, who comes and asks for his daughter Chryseis back. Not only does Agamemnon say, no, you can't have him, can't have her and go away, but he says to him specifically, she's going to share my bed until she's old, and she's going to be taken from her homeland. And this idea of being taken from your homeland is a very powerful idea in antiquity, and particularly in epic heroism, because that sort of signifies death, right? So we hear this idea of not being able to return to your homeland. That phrase only ever, apart from this particular scene, that phrase is only ever used to describe the heroes as they die. So, for example, Sarpedon is told that he'll never return to his homeland. So it's a very emotional concept for Homeric epic. And he basically says, I'm going to sleep with her endlessly. I'm going to rape her until she's old. So he goes beyond just saying no. He is sort of quite vitriolic and vindictive in the way that he says to Chryses to go away. He then compares Chryseis to Clytemnestra, and we're going to come back to the significance of that. Obviously, Clytemnestra, a reminder that is Agamemnon's wife at home, and he says that actually I prefer this woman to Clytemnestra. She's better in every way than my own wife, which I think is a pretty dangerous thing to say. It's also worth noting that Achilles is the one that calls the assembly during the plague. It's not Agamemnon. So Achilles actually here demonstrates that leadership and demonstrates that care for his people that Agamemnon does not. He then also threatens Calchas. So when Calchas says, I've got a plague, there's a plague and I've got a message from the gods and I'm worried about telling you, and Achilles has to say, don't worry, I'll protect you. Calchas is scared of Agamemnon. And then when Calchas does reveal that it's Agamemnon that's caused this plague, Agamemnon says to him specifically, you never tell me anything favourable. You never bring me any prophecies that are any good to me. reminder, why does he say this? This is a reference to the beginnings before they even left for Troy. Calchas was the one who said when all of the Greeks were trapped with unfavourable winds and couldn't get over to Troy, Calchas was the one who said to Agamemnon, you have to sacrifice a virgin. And a reminder that the virgin that Agamemnon decided to sacrifice was his own daughter, Iphigenia. And so he already hates Calchas. He clearly blames Calchas, even though Calchas is just the messenger of the gods. He clearly blames Calchas for the fact that he's already had to lose his daughter. Now, this scene is really important because both referencing the outside of the narrative before the Trojan War with Iphigenia, and the fact that he references Clytemnestra in the future, obviously we know that beyond this poem, when Agamemnon returns home, Clytemnestra is going to murder him. The audience in Greek that were enjoying the epic poem would also know this, so this would be relevant to the Greek audience as well, where they would see this as sort of intertextual references beyond the narrative. And let's go into that a little bit more. So putting him within the canon of literature. So first of all, another great scholarship quote to have in your back pocket that you can apply to lots of different essays is this one. Competition among males is conducted through a woman. Obviously, that refers to book 1 with Achilles and Agamemnon. And it also refers to the start of the Trojan War to begin with Menelaus and Paris and Helen. And you could even say that beyond the narrative, obviously Clytemnestra has had an affair with Aegisthus. And so it refers to that beyond the narrative as well. So this sort of hints towards Clytemnestra as well. We also get this excellent scholar who I would always use for Agamemnon, Andrew Porter. And this reference to Clytemnestra, he says, implicates Agamemnon's future, his dismal homecoming, his kakos nostos. So obviously nostos is this idea of homecoming, where we get the word nostalgia from, really important throughout the Odyssey. But it's also important in the Iliad as well, where we know that this is not going to work out well for Agamemnon. And not only is he upsetting in book 1 the stability of his warrior culture through his insulting reaction to the priest and his requests, he's also potentially upsetting the stability of his own oikos. Remember, that's his own household. And so it's this idea for Agamemnon in book 1, he has disrupted not only his current oikos, as in the warrior culture and where he's currently living within the Greek camp, but he's also disrupting the future of his oikos and his home with his wife through his comparison and his sort of obsession with Chryseis. Obviously, the woman that he brings home from the Trojan War is Cassandra. Okay, we then get book 3, where we see him sort of beginning almost to act like a king. We see this through the speech of other people. So remember to go back to that Evie Ryu quote, that it's not just through their own speech that they reveal their own character, but it's through the speech of others that we reveal character. And in book 3, we see Priam and the elders and Helen all sitting on the wall talking about the heroes. And Priam says, tell me who that great warrior is, that tall and powerful Achaean. There are others taller, true, but I've never seen so handsome or so regal a man, every inch a king. And he's talking about Agamemnon there. So Agamemnon, for all intents and appearances, seems to be a king. And Helen replies, that is Imperial Agamemnon, Atreus' son, a great king and a mighty spearman. So even though he's not there, and remember, as general advice to us, how people talk about us when we're not there is the most important. But Agamemnon is not there. They're not saying this out of a sense of flattery. This is their genuine, true opinion, that he does appear to be a king. And we see him acting quite kingly in book 3, because he takes on the role of the leader in swearing that oath. So the oath that they swear between Menelaus and Paris for this duel, Agamemnon takes on the role of leader there, and he sacrifices the animal, he swears the oath, and then at the end of the book, when Paris has disappeared, he's the one that declares that the Trojans have broken the oath, and he rallies his men right at the end of the book and sort of capitalizes on their indignation. So book 3, we do see him somewhat acting like a king. And then we get book 4. I put a question mark, because is he a leader? Is he not? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So a reminder in book 4, Menelaus gets wounded, and that sort of spurs him to action. He then moves among his men, he encourages them one by one, varied success, and we're going to come back to that. When Menelaus is wounded, if we're looking into this in a little bit more detail, His main concern is the embarrassment that he'll face if he has to go home. He's not actually that concerned about Menelaus. He's more concerned about what people will say to him if Menelaus dies. Because obviously, for him, if Menelaus dies, there's no point in them being there. There's no point in fighting the Trojan War. There's no point in fighting for Helen because Menelaus is dead. And so he sees that the embarrassment that this is all going to cause and his whole sort of campaign out there is going to crumble. He then walks around on foot among his men, and this is seen to be sort of a good leadership position. He's seeing them eye to eye. He's not going around on a horse. However, listen to the details, because he does get one of his slaves to follow him with the horse just in case he gets tired. So he's trying his best, but he's aware that he still is quite kingly and might get tired because he's not really used to. It's perhaps a suggestion that he doesn't have that physical prowess of being able to walk around for a long time. As he walks around his men, he utilises particular Homeric heroic traits, such as eidos, that idea of shame, to sort of rouse his men. When he gets to Odysseus, this is one of his least successful rousings. Odysseus then fights back and rebukes him, and Agamemnon then sort of turns into a snivelling mess and has to apologise to him. He also doesn't have a great interaction with Diomedes, so he tries to motivate Diomedes by saying, your father was better than this, your father Tydeus was better than this. And that upsets Meletheus, who's Diomedes' sort of right-hand man. But Diomedes says that Diomedes accepts that rebuke from Agamemnon and says to Meletheus and his men that glory will be his if the Achaeans win and raise the sacred Ilium, but his will be the pain if we Achaeans lose. So Diomedes there sort of really distills the responsibility and the ownership that comes with leadership. And this is what's sort of motivating Agamemnon, that he wants that glory, but also he is very susceptible and vulnerable to pain and embarrassment. Okay, we obviously don't read book 5. Book 6 he doesn't really appear in. We don't read book 7 and 8. Book 9, we get him stressy, depressy, lemon zesty. So, reminder, book 7 and book 8, we get the Trojans right outside the Greek camp. They're winning. We have Achilles' prayer is starting to come true, that the Greeks are losing. And he suggests going home. So Agamemnon says, we're never going to win this. He's crying, he's weeping, and he suggests going home. This is received with complete silence by his men. And Diomedes then says, we're not doing that. You can do that if you want, but we're not going to go. Nestor takes Nestor's advice. He offers an embassy to Achilles. So, to get into this in more detail, the thing that we need to remember when he suggests going home is that in book 2, which obviously you don't need to read for OCR level, he suggests going home as a way to test his men. And so when the men are silent in book 9, that's because they don't want to sort of rise to his test. And this shows Agamemnon is almost turned into the boy who cries wolf here. And it shows that he's lost the trust and the belief of his men. We can see that he's really easily swayed by Diomedes and Nestor. He doesn't make his own decisions here. He takes on advice from everybody else. It's not great leadership. However, he does take accountability and he demonstrates his wealth and his power. He says, since I yielded blindly to a wretched passion, I'm willing to make amends and recompense Achilles handsomely. Remember that that geras, that demonstration of your big wealth, is a sign of being a hero. So this is not him being necessarily completely altruistic. It's him also showing how much he has, and he takes great pains to list all of his great wealth that he has. However, he also offers it with this caveat: let him give way and submit to me, for I claim sovereignty and seniority over him. And this is the really important thing that people often miss for book 9, is that yes, Agamemnon offers him all of these gifts and this geras, and he asks him to come fight on the condition that Achilles says that he is his superior. And that's the rub for Achilles. He still does not want to say that Agamemnon is better than him. He refuses to believe that. So that one caveat is the thing that sort of leaves this embassy in despair, and it makes it a failure. Obviously, the embassy in book 9 fails. Book 10, we see him starting to actually be a leader for once. So he's still at the very beginning of the book. Book 10 and book 9 both start off in the same way, with Agamemnon being very upset and very stressed out. However, we see him act in 2 very different ways between book 9 and book 10. So he rouses himself this time, and he rouses others for a night raid. we see a really clear power dynamic between him and Menelaus. So Menelaus is sort of snivelling around after him, saying like, "What should I do? What should I do?" We see a very much like it's very clear that Agamemnon is in control. Menelaus is not. When he wakes Nestor up, Nestor makes all of these suggestions to gather everybody for an assembly and perhaps suggest a night raid. Nestor makes these suggestions, and Agamemnon's already done it. So we see here again a shift in the power dynamic. He is starting to be able to create his own advice rather than relying on others. And when Diomedes volunteers for the night raid and he says, "You need to go with somebody else," he suggests that Diomedes not be swayed by status or royalty. And he does this out of care for Menelaus. So it's very clear that Agamemnon does not think that Menelaus is a particularly good soldier or a good hero. And he takes pains to protect him, which is quite sweet. He's a good big brother in that sense. Okay, we then get lots of books in which Agamemnon is not in. He sort of drifts from focus in the second half of the poem. Book 19, we see obviously Patroclus has died. Achilles is very upset. Achilles agrees to put aside his anger towards Agamemnon, and Agamemnon admits that he was blinded and offers to fight and offers the fights to Achilles again. Apologies, that should be offers the gifts to Achilles again. However, rather than saying, "Yeah, that was me, I was wrong," took accountability and responsibility, he gives this long, winding story about Ate, this idea of deception and how even Zeus gave into deception. So he sort of shifts blame to the gods and says, "Yeah, I was deceived by the gods in the same way Zeus was. I'm like Zeus. I'm just a man. How could I possibly have stood up to deception?" He swears an oath that he has not slept with Briseis. So this is an interesting one in terms of a women essay as well. Not that I think it would come up. Women in the Iliad has come up quite recently. But this idea that he swears that he's not slept with Briseis, which shows that perhaps he's misunderstood what Achilles was really upset about. Because Achilles has said at the start of book 19, when he says he put aside his anger towards Agamemnon, "I wish Briseis had died. I wish she wasn't even here. I wish that the gods had struck her down as she was on her ships." So Achilles is not bothered about Briseis at this point. Achilles is bothered about Patroclus. He was upset because of the shame and the embarrassment and the public humiliation and the threat to his teammate. And then we finally get book 23. We get the Geras returned. We have the funeral games in book 23. Agamemnon goes to compete in the javelin. Achilles says, "You don't need to compete in the javelin. I will award you first prize anyway," and he gives him a cauldron. This signifies a public reconciliation, and we reconcile this quarrel formed in book 1. Agamemnon finally gets sort of recognised as his superior in front of his people. Achilles just basically doesn't care anymore. He's given up. And so to Achilles, he's realised that this battle over who's best and who's the most important doesn't matter anymore, because Patroclus is dead. Achilles is going to die soon. That's all he really wants. He's sought his vengeance, and he's achieved his glory at a cost that he didn't really want to pay. So that's all of Agamemnon. And I'll end this with another sort of summary from Andrew Porter on Agamemnon, where he decides that he declares that Agamemnon, his actions are often chastised by his inferiors. So he's often criticised by his inferiors, and they end up in apology and a retraction. He blames divinity, yet is still responsible and suffers the consequences. We are presented with an Agamemnon who is also inept and unconvincing as a leader, plagued with a personality displaying problems of arrogance, imperiousness, irreverence, and insult. So Porter doesn't love Agamemnon. It's quite a disparaging summary of Agamemnon's character. I would encourage you to actually be a little kinder to Agamemnon. I defend Agamemnon. I think that he tries his very best. He's been given a position that is above his abilities, and he tries throughout the poem to sort of rise to the occasion, I suppose, with limited success perhaps. But I encourage you to give a balanced argument for Agamemnon. That's all for Agamemnon. I hope he comes up for your 20 marker and that you are well prepared. Goodbye.